Hello everybody, welcome back. Doing another deck tech. Magic! Yes! And today we have Modern. Now, I have been waiting for so long to play this deck, because this is like one of my favorite decks to play with online. This is a Snakes Tribal deck, which you don't get to see every day, because I actually don't think I've ever seen one. I don't think I've ever seen someone try and make a snake deck. But yeah, so lots of snakes, lots to get through. Let's start at ones. So we have Sakura Tribe Scout. 1/1, you can tap it to put a land from your hand into play. So it's sort of like a mana dork as long as you have mana to go with it. But mana to go with it in this deck is pretty good thanks to this card next to him. So we'll get to that when we get to it, but 3 copies of that lets you put more lands into play if you have them. Then we have 4 copies of Hexdrinker. This is a brand new, well-ish. Few sets have come out.
Yeah, a few sets have come out since, but
it's the newest playable snake, I think. Yeah, so it's a level up creature, one of the only that you can actually reasonably include in a deck and not feel bad about it.
yeah, even like the Merfolk one got pushed out.
Yeah.
There's just too many Merfolk lords, so
Yeah, Student Warfare, same thing. But yeah, this is like fits in a lot of decks. So it levels up for a colorless. It starts out as a 2/1 for 1, which is already ahead of the curve. Once you hit 3, it becomes a 4/4 with protection from instants. So
it turns off all those pesky removal spells.
yeah, most of them, certainly. And then at 8+, it becomes a 6/6 with protection from everything, which is everything else that you have to worry about almost.
Everything.
Yeah, still can get Wrath, unfortunately.
That's always the downside.
That's about the only thing.
I guess he eats and eats and eats, and then he becomes a little progenitus.
Yeah.
Progenitus's babies are terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the best thing about cards like this, especially in this style of deck, because a lot of times you sort of just trade 1-for-1s with your opponent, if you draw a Hexdrinker on like turn 9, well then it's just like dump all your mana into it, and you have half a progenitus. It's like amazing. So it's a great early play, it's a great late game play, just great all around. 2 Essence Fluxes. So a lot of these things, not these 2 in particular, but a lot of these things have Enter the Battlefield abilities that you are going to want to have multiple triggers on, especially Mystic Snake. So Essence Flux, even though there aren't any snake spirits in this deck, allows you to essentially save something if you need to, or just rebuy for value like an Ice Fang Coil, Coiling Oracle, etc. Yeah, so the entire reason I wanted to build this deck, Lotus Cobra. We got these.
Yeah, you got us some very fancy Lotus Cobras.
Some sweet Grand Prix art. This is actually a card that, like, since this art came out, and I remember when it came out, like the promo version of it, that's like always been on my bucket list that I want those copies, because I think that is an absolutely gorgeous
It's beautiful
picture.
art.
It's Therese Nielsen, so you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with her.
Although I guess she's a Trump supporter, apparently. But anyway, art-wise,
She can be forgiven with that art.
gorgeous. But yeah, Lotus Cobra, 2/1 for 2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you add a mana of any color to your mana pool. So that's sort of what is fueling a lot of this deck, is being able to make tons of mana in early turns, mid turns. Like, this is pretty good at any stage of the game, and the rest of the deck is built to support having tons of mana or having not tons of mana. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, so Lotus Cobra, great inclusion. Ice Fang Coil, another one of the newest playable snakes that everyone's stuffing into decks.
Set. Gets stuffed into all the decks.
Most decks that I've seen this in, it also comes with Astrolab. I'm not playing that, because I need it to be a snake.
You need it to be a snake.
I need it because it's a snake. Not because it's a, like, weird thing that everyone's including if they can. Yeah, so Flying Flash, draw a card when it enters the battlefield, and if you have 3 other snow permanents, then he has Death Touch as well. So it's sort of like a surprise removal spell. Great card all around. Great to bounce with, or flicker with Essence Flux as well. Coiling Oracle, same sort of idea. He kind of draws a card, but it's more of an explorer, so if the top card is a land, it just enters the battlefield, which helps with Lotus Cobra, helps you with, like, just getting to this faster, tons of things. But worst case scenario, he just reveals the card and puts it in your hand.
Yeah, worst case scenario, it's a draw card, which is excellent.
And he's a snake.
So,
the most important.
Among other things.
Yeah. So, for when your 4 copies of Hexdrinker aren't enough, we have 4 copies of Stonecoil Serpent as well. Now, I think this is actually the newest playable snake. I have seen some people play this. It's usually in, like, artifact combo decks. But...
Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah. Any kind of thing that can make a ton of mana, you can definitely dump that because trample. Trample is a keyword.
Yeah, and protection from multicolored is actually a fair bit of things.
Yeah, definitely for modern.
Yeah.
Not as much Pioneer, but still quite a bit of Pioneer. So
yeah, there's a lot of Dreadbores and Coligans commands, those sorts of things running around. Yeah. Anyway, but same deal with Hexdrinker. Like, you could play him on turn 3 as a 3/3 and not be totally upset about it. There are some reasons why you would want to just dump that for no real value. But also, like, top deck that on turn 10, now you have a 10/10. It's great. Good at all points of the game. And the trample is very important. And in this deck, actually, reach is sort of important too, because this is the only other way of blocking stuff like that. Yeah, so then, this isn't really a creature, it's Sosuke summons. It makes 2 1/1 snake creature tokens, but whenever a non-token snake enters the battlefield under your control, you get to return this from your graveyard to your hand, which is like most of the deck, so usually you can just keep doing it every turn.
It's chump blockers that rebuy themselves whenever you cast literally anything else.
Yeah, which is
pretty
most
good.
of the things. Yeah, and also, like, if your opponent makes you discard a card, like with a Liliana or something, that's a great one to discard.
Yeah, because you just get it back the next turn.
Exactly.
They're not really accomplishing anything.
It's sort of like Squee, but for snakes. Yeah, so then we have Mystic Snake. This is one of my favorite snakes. It's a 4-mana, flash 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you counter target spell. So it actually gets around a lot of, like, other control elements, because it's a creature with a enters the battlefield ability countering the thing. So, like, if your opponent has a negate to, like, protect their thing,
or a dispel,
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Spell pierce.
And the fact that you can essence flux it is great, because you can have 1 blue open and counter a spell.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. And you also have ways of fetching that out at instant speed, 1 with Court of Calling, so you can, like, get your opponent out of nowhere with a Court.
And it leaves behind a bear.
And it leaves behind a bear.
Pretty good.
And even better, it's a snake, because at our top end, for 6 mana here, we have Seshiro the Anointed. 3 copies of that. It's a legendary creature, Snake Monk. Other snakes you control get +2/+2, so it's like a double Snake Lord. But whenever a snake you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So that's why these Sosuke summons are very good to just, like, early turn, play one of these, next turn, like, dump that, just do that a few times, and then when you get to 6, you have a small army of snakes that
just
are suddenly
refills your
3/3s.
hand.
Yeah, and then you just refill your hand. So, very, very good card. In this deck and no other deck, basically.
Yes. Yeah, you kind of got to go all in on the snakes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then, like I said, 1 Court of Calling to get whatever you need to get. So if you have a ton of tokens, you can even get a Seshiro if you want with the Court of Calling. But you do have a lot of cheap creatures, so sometimes you just need, like, a Caudal, sometimes you need to counter something real bad. Cord does it all. Only 1, though, because it is a little restrictive to cast. Yeah, so, as you noticed, there are a lot of, like, well, these cards care about land drops. 3 Wooded Foothills, 4 Misty Rainforests. And then, these are also very useful in that situation. 3 copies of Simic Growth Chamber, so it's a bounce land.
Yeah, so this also helps with either the landfall thing or with the Sasuke or with the Sakura tribe, because you just return the land and, look, you have land in your hand again. You just put it back on the field.
Yeah, it's great. And also, this card combined with Simic Growth Chamber can also, like, protect you against some stuff. So let's say we have, like, a Cavern of Souls in play. That's something that if your opponent's playing a control deck, they're probably going to want to blow up that land, because it's preventing them from doing anything. So as soon as they go to do it, you can flash in a bounce land, return that to your hand.
Yeah, they're like, Ghost Quarter that, and you're like...
there goes their value.
I'm going to return that to my hand.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, you can do that at instant speed. Not something they'll expect.
No, not typically. Yeah, so very good for all those stated reasons. Then we have 4 Cavern of Souls, like I said, so a lot of snakes, obviously. You're going to want to be able to make them uncounterable. That's a good way to do it. 3 Breeding Pool, just because you need to fetch some dual lands sometimes. And then a lot of snow basics, 5 Snow-Covered Forests, and 1 Snow-Covered Island. Those are, of course, to help with the Ice Fang Quaddle, to get him to his Death Touch.
To eventual Death Touch.
Yeah. And I figured it doesn't really hurt running snows over non-snows, so might as well run some basics.
Yeah.
Snow
Eventually,
basics.
he could potentially have Death Touch, but
Yeah.
it's not as important.
No, certainly
in this
not in this
list.
deck. Yeah, so that is Simic Snakes.
Very exciting.